Hi, and thank you for joining us on World Hearing Day. I'm joined today by a panel of industry experts to discuss virtual events and accessibility, the key challenges and opportunities. We've had over 250 people sign up today, watching on accessloop.com, our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, and we've had many more requesting a recording of the event. So it does seem that this is a topic of interest. We've also had a comment from someone to say that the music was very groovy at the start and they're dancing away. So I'm Orla Pearson. I'm a director of MyClearText, a company that provides live captioning for events. I'm also a director and co-founder of AccessLoop. I'm a white woman in my 40s, well, just in my 40s, with what I'm calling red lockdown hair. I'm wearing a black top with a necklace with white and black shaped stones. And this may be the first time I've been fully dressed for work this year and last year. As always, we've got a couple of housekeeping points. Please share your questions for our speakers in Slido, which can be found alongside the stream window. Please put them in the Q&A box. We are launching a couple of polls over the course of the event, and you can share your responses using the polls tab. Please don't put your answers in the Q&A tab on Slido, so make sure you're hitting the polls tab. So to get the ball rolling, I'm going to launch our first poll and find out what your role is and who is at our event. So if you use the Slido box along the side of the stream window to write your answer, and we'll bring up the results in a word cloud. Ooh. It's quite interesting. We have accessibility event organisers, we've got some captioners and event managers, interpreters, developers, global head of confusion. I want to meet that person. Audiovisual technician. Okay, so we seem to have quite a variety of people here today. Events organiser, events manager. Cart captioner, great. So for those of you who don't know, a cart captioner is a computer-aided real-time transcriber, which is a captioner, which is either a stenographer or a palantypist, which I am one of. So on World Hearing Day, it would be good to look at some statistics. Did you know that 1 in 6 of the UK adult population is affected by hearing loss? If you're organising a virtual event, that means up to 16% of your attendees may struggle to hear what your presenters are saying. So thinking about accessibility requirements for your attendees or your client may not have been on your delivery plan, but we're really hoping that it will be a more important consideration for you by the end of today. We know there are many, many hidden audiences who use captions to support them watching virtual content, who may not request them, but will benefit from them. Older people, people with neurodiversity or auditory processing difficulties, and those with English as a second language really want to have those captions on there. And it really ups percentages of people benefiting from this kind of accessibility. 85% of people watching content online do so without sound. So if your content doesn't have captions on it, it will be skipped. And let's not forget the audience who have BSL as a first language or preference, who will be excluded without an interpreter present. So before I introduce my first guest, here's a quick soundbite from Matthew Johnston from ThoughtWorks.
Hi, I'm Matthew Johnston here, and I'm profoundly deaf at birth. I wear a cochlear implant so I can hear something, but I live, breathe, and most of the time to make multiplication. I work for a global software company called ThoughtWorks as a delivery lead. I'm also a trustee for Scope, a large disability charity, and Save Tech, a small charity which provides accessibility in art, museum, and theatre. I have a big passion of putting captions in large venues, and I'm really delighted to say that Lord Cricket are going to put the caption on their large screen in the summer in a couple of their test matches. So, what is my experience of accessibility in virtual conferences? It's mixed. The really good thing about it is that I can see everybody at the same time, which is great delivery. Problem is, if there are a lot of people, the time gets smaller, which is making it even harder to read, and it's not 3D. So I really have to focus, concentrate what they're trying to say. So I need caption as well. Now we have those main big conference tools like Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. They all have automatic caption or ESR. They're great, and people say, wow, look at them. They come up really well. But actually, for someone like me who actually relies on those captions, if you read it word by word, they don't come out word by word, and a lot of words are misspelled. So I have to over-process to work it out what they're trying to say. So with the combination of trying to understand what they're trying to read and read the caption, it's really hard work. The other thing is I tell people not everybody have their video on, which is very understandable. I get that. But I ask them when they speak, they put their camera on so that I can read, and then when they can finish speaking, then turn the camera on. So going back to caption, I relied on caption, and therefore I do have human captioning to provide the caption because they're much more accurate. And they make the sentences, they're nuanced sentences, which make sense. So I'm really delighted to hear about this new platform called Asset Loop. The objective is to make it really accessible for everybody. And I'm really looking forward to see how this platform progresses.
So it's lovely to see Matthew there. He's an amazing advocate for live captions everywhere. He works with ThoughtWorks, who now have live captioning at all their events around the world, thanks to him. He's also the first deaf person to sit on a jury, and he was the foreman of that jury, and he persevered and worked with the jury service to meet his access needs in a way that suited him, and also the rules around the jury room, and it worked. So first up, I'm delighted to be joined by Melanie Sharp, the CEO at Stage Text. Stage Text have been going for over 20 years. It was started by Peter Pullen, Murphy Williams, and Jeff Brown, and each of them had various types of deafness. With a love for the arts and a determination to improve access for all deaf, deafened, and hard of hearing people, they set out to make the arts arena accessible. They went into theatres at ground level, getting buy-in from the theatres, training technicians, and really educating events organisers in this sector around the needs of the audiences, but also the wider benefits of making their content accessible in this way. It began with theatre and then moved into the live talks venues and content like the South Bank, the Welcome Connection, the Royal Society, and many other huge venues and conferences and events around the country. We also captioned the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games. They now have a digital department, and they subtitle a huge range of pre-recorded performances and online videos. In the last 3 years, Stage Text have been working with MyClearText as their delivery partners, using MyClearText's expertise in technical delivery of big events to deliver high-quality live captioning to the Stage Text clients. With the development of Access Loop, Stage Text are looking to the future with this platform, making it easier to deliver all kinds of caption content to their clients. So Melanie, today is World Hearing Day, and we're raising awareness around the accessibility for deaf audiences. What insight have you learned along the Stage Text journey of working in this sector?
Thank you, Ola, for having me today. I really appreciate it, first and foremost. And it's great to be here and working together even more. And I think that's so important in these times, that everybody is supporting everybody. So World Hearing Day, what a big title, because actually it's a very wide and large group of people. And I think the thing that I have learnt the most on my journey with Stage Text is that one size doesn't fit all. There is not the standard, oh, they're deaf, that's it. There's no kind of differentiation of people's hearing loss. And I think that is one of the things that everybody needs to be made aware of, that actually hearing loss covers a wide range of people, and it can be anybody who has been deaf at birth, like Matthew, through to the person who is in their 50s and has started to lose bits of their hearing, and it's just maybe the top notes, so they only miss and so they have to fill in the gaps as they go along, and it's tiring, it wears you out. And I think for venues and arts organisations, the more awareness they can have about deafness and hearing loss, the better. They will provide a better service. That's why training staff and making sure that everyone within your organisation, whoever you are, has the basic understanding of what deaf and hard of hearing actually means for an individual. And of course, ask, make yourself inquisitive, and don't be frightened. Most people would rather be asked what their access requirements are rather than it being assumed or ignored, of course. So the more that we can work together in making people more aware within the arts and cultural sector about hearing loss, the better. And of course, for stage text, working with My Clear Text, it's also about standards. Actually, something is not better than nothing. You need to be able to be providing excellence and accuracy. And as Matthew was saying there, it needs to be accurate. He doesn't want to be guessing every other word. So you need to make sure that you are providing equality, because equality is access. Accessible content needs to be of a good quality and standard. Does that help? That's my passion.
That is very much what I would agree 100% with you, Melanie. And I think it's really important, that hidden audience you're talking about as well. And, you know, it's really good to ask if people have access needs at events, but don't assume that just because people haven't asked that they don't. So I think that's, I completely agree with everything that you've said. Standard is, and, you know, sometimes something is not, you know, I think it's best to have the best that you can have at these events. So another question for you, Melanie. What kind of technical challenges have you encountered along the way in providing these services to your clients?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the last year has been very challenging for everybody. I don't know about technical challenges. I think just surviving has been a great challenge over the last 15 months, isn't it? So for us, I think it was the move to the cultural sector online. The challenges that has brought, because we Stage Text and the staff within Stage Text had to do some fairly quick, nifty learning themselves, going and finding out about all the different platforms, the different things that are accessible, not accessible, and go on a big learning curve, actually. And the great thing about the cultural sector is there is a willingness to share their work. We don't make work in a vacuum within the arts. We make it for people. So what's the point of making something if it isn't accessible and it isn't reaching the widest possible audience possible? And as you say, that's not just about deaf and hard of hearing people, but for anyone who needs some extra support in accessing the text. So I think for us, the online and especially speech to text, the captioning live speech to text reporting has been extraordinary. Last year we delivered about 150 talks. This year we're set to have delivered 600. The explosion of awareness that your online event needs to be accessible has been extraordinary, and we're cheering, because that for us means that there is more choice for the end recipient. We want everybody to be able to enjoy access, and the technical difficulties have been around enabling people to understand their role within that process. And for many people, we are not dealing with the technical people or the access people who used to be there previously, because they've either been furloughed or made redundant. The arts and the challenges financially are significant, and so people are having to learn new information, new roles that they never set out to do. And so Stage Tech's role has been about supporting venues, supporting the arts practitioners in learning how to make their work and their content accessible, because without that, it's very difficult. And the amount of support that people need is time consuming, of course. And that's where Access Loop comes in.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. We've seen a massive increase in people wanting content to be accessible as my clear text. And it's a really fantastic thing. But on the other hand, as you have all of the way that we're delivering is completely different than we were in the past, because everything is online and everything looks to stay online too. So this is a constant challenge, and it's a challenge for the future of this sector and the future of accessibility in events. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there, Melanie. And finally, what benefits do you think Access Loop will bring to your work in the future?
I think for us, I think it's about ease of process. People get absolutely, including myself, I'm not the most technical person in the world. Orla will agree with that.
Yes.
I want to know that if I do this, will those people be able to get access? And is it going to be the best quality? I'm not particularly interested in how it's done. That's wrong of me. I know that, but it's the truth, and I'm being very truthful.
That's why you have us, Melanie. That's why you have us.
That's why you're there. Yeah. And I think the thing about Access Loop is it provides that link. It provides the link between the people who are providing the subtitles and the captioning. So it could be live or it could be pre-formatted text. So it can go into Access Loop, and then of course it can go out onto as many platforms that you're going to watch this content as possible. Yeah, so it gives variety of choice, and it actually expands your audiences. So venues who may want to be, like today, view it on Facebook, view it on YouTube, view it on Vimeo, they can use Access Loop and it will go directly to all those channels through one place, Access Loop. And of course, it's also can have BSL as well. So you've got the captions, you've got the BSL interpretation, and I know in future you're looking at audio description as well.
We are.
So it could be eventually a one-stop place to provide all those different services. So that for us, it's about choice and it's about ease of process.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason that we really brought Access Loop into being was to simplify the whole process, because as a provider, and like you say, all those people that normally you would be dealing with, which is the accessibility officer or the person who's the events organizer, who may have some experience, have been furloughed. So the people that we're dealing with are very different, and they come to us with little or no knowledge and very little equipment and very little anything but they want to be accessible. So we really want to make that easy, because if someone wants to be accessible, we need to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. So it isn't seen as a problem. Oh no, we have to make the event accessible. So hopefully Access Loop will put a smile on people's faces and make it incredibly easy to do so. So Melanie, I'm really grateful for you for coming on. We have long working relationship, and we love everything that Stage Text does, and we wish you luck in the future, as I know you've got some fantastic plans coming down the line. I think Melanie had a couple of problems with her connection there, so apologies for that, but lovely to see you, Melanie. That's all right, it's allowed in this new world. So we're going to have another poll now before we move on to the panel. And the question is, have you ever added accessibility to a virtual event? So while you share your replies, we're going to hear from Karen Green from Interpreting Matters, and this is one we've recorded earlier. And the reason I say that is because Karen is one of our interpreters today, so she may end up interpreting herself, which might be strange today. So over to Karen.
Hello, I'm Karen Green. I'm a sign language interpreter. I've been interpreting for about 26 years now, and I also run and own Interpreting Matters, which is a sign language interpreting provider. And I've been asked to just say a few words about Access Loop. So in terms of provision for live events that we've been providing for through lockdown and remote events, the issues that we've experienced have been the technical setup and the time that's required for that technical setup for people in the background. And the other thing is the ease of use for Access Loop. From what I've seen, you just follow a link and the interpreters are in, so which is great. Communication during the job is really important as well for interpreters to give each other support when you're working. So there's usually one interpreter that's the active live interpreter and another interpreter that's the support interpreter, and they swap during the job and they swap roles. Until now, that swapping usually on the cameras is controlled by the technical person at the other end, and we have to communicate with them via maybe a WhatsApp message or via communication on the platform that we're on. So we have to say to them, swap camera after next speaker or something like that. So from what I've seen on this is how Access Loop will work is the interpreters will have control over their own cameras, which will be great. The swap overs will be a lot smoother. So whereas a tech person doesn't understand sign language, so they might cut us off mid-sentence and bring the other interpreter in. With the interpreters having their own control over the cameras, they can control that swap over, so it's a lot smoother. The app allows the interpreters to see each other as well, so that supporting interpreter can offer the support that the active interpreter might be needing. So that's really good, and there's direct communication as well between the people running the platform and running the event, and the captioners all on that one platform through the chat function. So from what I can see, it's going to be a lot more supporting to the professionals providing the services on the job.
So thank you very much, Karen. And looking at our poll, have you ever added accessibility to a virtual event? So 75% of you here today have, but 25% of you haven't. So that's quite a good and interesting mix of people. So hopefully we're going to give you some or show you some much better ways to add accessibility to your events with Access Loop. So I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Neil Milliken from Atos, and I will let Neil introduce himself and the panel, and I will see you on the panel.
Thank you very much, Orla. It's really good to be with you today. So yes, as Orla says, I'm the Global Head of Accessibility and Digital Inclusion at Atos. Sometimes those end up with me being the Global Head of Confusion, so now you've met me. I think we've got a great panel today, and it's one that I'm very familiar with. So we've got Mark Walker from AbilityNet and Joanna Wooden joining us. Hello again, dear friend, and also Orla, of course. So delighted to have you with us. But before we start on that, we do have a third poll around what are we offering within digital events, because actually there are all sorts of accommodations that might be required. I'm here today, because actually I really like what Access Loop are doing. I've been running online events and online stuff through Access Chat for 7 years, and we've needed to add captions to that, sometimes live, sometimes post-event, and we get some expert help with that from our friends at MyClearText. But essentially, there are all kinds of different configurations of online events. This last year has thrown every kind of event into confusion. We've had to reinvent how events happen. You know, whether that be conferences or seminars or online learning, the way that we interact has changed. And the different things that we're trying to do may require different accommodations and different provisions of accessibility. So we're really interested, and I think that the team at Access Loop are really interested in what you provided right now, and probably also what we're interested in, what you would like to provide, because quite often at the start of this, there weren't the things that we needed in order to provide what we would like to in terms of equality for people to participate in online events, and Access Loop's been born out of that. So if you could go to Slido, we're going to have the third poll now, and that is around captions and or plus sign language. And one of the things that's not in the questions, but that I would love to see later, maybe in the Q&A, is what else do you do in terms of accommodations for online events? Thank you very much. So a bit more of a full introduction of our panel members. Mark Walker, you've been responsible for the marketing and now the portfolio for AbilityNet for quite some time. We've crossed paths on multiple occasions. You put on a grand online event for one of the largest accessibility events for AbilityNet, which brings in a huge number of people. And Joanna, you've been working in the field of accessibility as a consultant for many years. First met you through Business Disability Forum, but you've done some great work with Sainsbury's and large corporates. And then, do I need to introduce you all? Well, great to have you as the part of the MyClearText and now the Access Loop team. So I've gone through the introductions, but my first question is to Joanna. What's your experience been of accessibility in virtual events? And you've probably got two hats here. One is as a speaker, and the second one as an attendee.
Hi Neil and everybody watching. It's great to be here today. Thank you for asking me. First, I probably should explain that I was born deaf, and like Matthew, who you saw earlier, I have a cochlear implant. Prior to that, I didn't. So I'm plugged in, you can see. But what that means is that if I'm talking to one person online, on Zoom or Teams or whatever, if it's one-on-one, I can follow people. It's not too bad because I'm able to interrupt, and that's okay, and I can ask people to clarify. But I can't do that at an event. So I do need captions in that situation, or an interpreter. I'm flexible, it depends on the situation, because I do sign as well. And one of the things is, if I'm a speaker, what people don't actually think about are my needs as a speaker. They're focusing on the needs of the attendees. But obviously it's a good thing. Please do, everybody watching this, do think about your attendees. I'm in favour of that. But as a speaker, people don't actually ask me what my needs are for accessibility, and this does matter. Sometimes what people just give me access to, because I specifically ask about it, might be the captions that are being used for the attendees, but that's okay, but it means I don't have access to the backroom chatter and warm up. But quite often with panels and so on, they're joshing each other and they're warming up and they're saying, are you going to cover this and this? And I can't actually follow what's going on. And it was really awkward a couple of times when I was actually meant to be chairing it. I was trying to get everybody feeling into the mood, but not really knowing what they were saying back to me, but hoping I was okay. But obviously it was fine once I went live. And this might be where an interpreter might have been more useful. just to have my own communication support. Obviously, I've learned from that, so I arrange my own communication support for behind the scene, but often actually I do it because people don't think to offer it to me. As an attendee, I will use both captions and interpreters. My other half actually has started losing his hearing, age-related. He was never asked for caption, but he's very happy when they're there. I don't go to events if it's not available. If I don't have to, I will use, if I have to, the auto captioning. But it's really hard work. It's not enjoyable, and I'm not going to do it unless I'm paid to do it. Which means if you're not paying me to do it, I'm not rocking up. Okay? If you want to pay me, that's okay, by the way. But that's the reality of it. Good quality captioning matters, and so does good quality interpreting. But the other thing is, this relates to a point that Karen made earlier, is that I have noticed that sometimes, particularly with interpreters, because they haven't been able to get support from their co-worker, they've made mistakes and they haven't been able to rectify them because they haven't got the feed in. And that's been, so I really like the idea of this access loop, because I think it will result in a much better service for everybody, because the interpreters will be able to co-work more smoothly. I would be able to see the captioning as well, and so will anybody else watching it. I've got a lot of experience of people saying to me afterwards, I'm so glad you had the captioning because I benefited. There are a lot of people, they talk about shy Tories, there are also shy caption users. So do cater for them. And for anybody who's visually impaired, I forgot to say, I'm wearing a bright orange top, and I've got black framed glasses, and I've got locked down hair, but it's tied up, so I look really tidy and professional, okay? Over to you, Neil. I'll stop talking now.
No, that's fine. So yeah, I also forgot. So again, late 40s, white male, brown squarish glasses. Lucky I married my hairdresser, so my hair isn't in lockdown style. And I'm wearing a blue jumper. One of the things that I've also noticed, and I don't have a hearing impairment, but I do sometimes use captions for myself, is that there is a big difference between when the speakers are identified and when they're not, because the cognitive load for someone like me that has a neurodivergent condition is significant. And also seeing stuff that is auto-correcting itself a lot of the time is quite distracting. So I end up not really paying attention to what's going on, but watching sort of stuff morph and change as the artificial intelligence is trying to work out what to put down on the screen. So good quality captions also reduce the cognitive load for people like me. When you're saying about going to conferences as an attendee, obviously we're now in an age where conferences are virtual. Has that increased the number of conferences that you attend because there's more likely to be captions, or is it more of a case that you're still avoiding them where you don't have to be there if you know that they're not going to be good?
I think accessibility has improved, that more people are probably providing it, partly because it's a bit easier for organisers to do it at the last minute. But and I think people have got better about knowing how to showcase it when I compare the beginning of the pandemic to now. And so that is really nice. It is really nice being included and not having a song and dance about it. And I do really appreciate that.
Great. And how have you coped with the massive explosion of online conferences? Because one of the things that I found was that everybody's decided that they have to go virtual, and that there's a conference every day. It's almost how are you dealing with that, and how do you find the information about the accessibility of the conferences? Because I think that that's something that quite often you're saying, I only go to conferences that I know are going to be accessible unless I'm going to be paid. How do you find that out when there's so many? Surely there's got to be quite a sort of an overhead for you in that respect.
So is that for me or Mark?
Yes, that's for you. Sorry, Joanna, and then I'll come on to Mark in a moment.
Okay. Well, I do look at the blurb. So if people say it's going to be accessible, I'm much more likely to sign up. What I have done is sometimes taken a punt because I'm at home anyway, and so I sign up, and if it's not accessible, I log off. It's as simple as that, because I don't have to travel to an event. So something I think they haven't bothered. So I just sign in for 5 minutes and leave again. So I suppose I've experimented a bit more. But what I've also done, because I'm able to be plugged in the computer, I think, well, maybe the speaker will be facing the camera and it will be really clear. Maybe I'll be able to muddle through. And I'm finding I'm not able to muddle through. And that's what's interesting. I'd assumed that I might be able to, but too often I can't because people don't speak clearly, or they've got slides take up most of the screen, or they're just messing about. Sorry, they're making our event look really professional. I meant to say that, sorry, yes. But it means that I don't have eyeballs on the speaker all the time, and they need to be like this for me to get it. So if they're doing this and they've been shrunk, I'm moving, I'm leaving. And also, we're all online so much now that I kind of can't be bothered unless it's easy for me. So this is where having an interpreter, having captions, fine. You've made it easier for me to stay. I'll stay. And then also it means I can focus on what I'm there to do, which is learn from the event, not to waste all my energy and trying to figure out on what's happening.
Thank you. So, Mark, you organise a really huge event, which is TechShare Pro, and that's one of the sort of marquee events in the accessibility calendar, certainly within Europe. As an event organizer, what are the challenges that you've encountered in making the virtual version of TechShare Pro more inclusive?
Well, thanks, Neil. And I think picking up on the point that you made with Joanna, it's actually not just about the attendees, and it is actually the organisers. Some of the stuff we had challenges with was going to different people, to the people we'd run the events with before. So we had, we'd run an event as a face-to-face. We got used to certain suppliers. I mean, for example, my clear text obviously falls into that category, and that slipped neatly into the virtual world. But there are other suppliers and other people we were talking to who it wasn't relevant to involve them because they were the real world face-to-face suppliers. And equally, we had to learn a whole load of new stuff about how you do this online event thing. And the other event that I did last year was the Tech for Good Awards, which was in its 10th year. And pretty much it ran identically for 9 years, almost exactly. The script could just have the last year's winners taken out and this year's put in. It was, it was a nice thing to do because we got a routine going. So some of the challenge was actually reformatting it and thinking about what you do with the shape of the time and how you get people together, trying to pick out the best bits of what you're doing and try and hold on to them if you can somehow. So a lot of challenges there. And accessibility for us, obviously, I would say this broadly, we were fine with accessibility because we'd always been thinking about it. But it falls into that camp of, the tech or the suppliers or the format or just thinking through what the difference would be. So for us, that was a relatively straightforward problem to solve because we could see what the standards were and we knew what we wanted to achieve. The other stuff was much, much harder. And we switched the Tech for Good Awards from 250 people in a venue for an afternoon to an hour's TV show, essentially, with me and someone in the studio announcing who the winners were. which felt a bit weird at the time, but actually worked brilliantly as a switch. But of course, we didn't know it was going to work. So, you know, I think that's been the most challenging part for any event organizer, just trying to work out how to take what you've currently got that you've probably been doing for a fair amount of time and take all the best bits and keep them. And then the accessibility clearly is a tricky thing in some cases. But for us, that was the biggest problem. So just an example with TechShare Pro, we had a 2-day event planned and we ran it over 3 days instead. The stuff you're talking about, people's ability to dip in and out of events, you've got to turn that to an advantage. Otherwise, because we were so used to the last time we ran it face-to-face in Google, first of all, it's in Google, so everybody turns up because it's interesting and exciting and shiny. That doesn't happen on a webinar. Oh, another webinar for a whole day. It's very unlikely somebody's going to do that. And then keeping somebody there, you could drop in. We got used to dropping in little pearls that you wouldn't have turned up to see this, but you're really glad you did. So your scheduling of your sessions and trying to sort of get the right mix of content that people want to see and stuff they didn't know that they wanted to see. That's also a challenge in that format. So we moved around the program. We put a little bit more stuff on demand so that there were things you could go and see whenever you wanted, which of course you wouldn't really do in a face-to-face. It doesn't really work that way. So I think that's the hardest bit, the shift into something that people are actually going to get something from. And then the accessibility components of that, there were a number of things that we needed to sort out. One of them, I think, is offering sign language in multiple languages, because what it meant was we had an international audience. Now, we didn't do that, as it happens. We couldn't arrange that. So the big advantage of being online is we have people from all over the world. The disadvantage is you suddenly changed your accessibility requirements fundamentally into multiple languages. So I think that's the type of thing which we could probably see coming, but couldn't do very much about. It's probably a resource thing. But of course, it's great because there was a big international audience in the room that there probably wasn't before. So you're weighing up the pros and cons there. And then a final bit, I think that was very noticeable to me, is it's really, really difficult to make the interactive networking stuff accessible. It's really easy like this, doing a straight out to broadcast type thing. But actually, what people go to conferences for is to meet other people and connect with them and find common ground. And so we worked hard to create networking spaces, but it was really difficult to create accessible networking spaces. That, you know, you rely on AI captions, frankly, but as much as we could do because we were using Teams. You know, over and above that, we could provide spaces where people could bring support workers in, but we couldn't genuinely make those spaces accessible in the same way. So, you know, that's an area that we need to think about and puzzle over. But you know, that's a good example of stuff that's just around the corner. I'm sure there will be solutions that will start to appear where people can do that personalized one-to-one, caption driven, or whatever it is, you know, because there could be all sorts of different features that you can add in at that point. So
yeah, so it's certainly one of the things that I've missed about real world conferences. So you covered a couple of the points that I was going to ask, you know, about the face-to-face networking, the ability to have those serendipitous conversations, and how do you make that accessible? So half of the time that I spend at conferences is in the corridors, partly because of cognitive load and my inability to sit still, but partly because that's where you get some of the best knowledge. It's through the conversations. So I think there's a couple of elements that I'm really interested in. One is, how do you make those conversations accessible when they happen? But also, how do you facilitate them? How do you bring them together, and how do you, you know, enable people to find each other and everything else? I think is a real challenge. And of course, yes, you're talking about at the moment automated captions, or whether you designate a meeting space where you know there's going to be, you know, human captioners. And then the international element, I've encountered a few times in my travels where yes, you've got an audience from all kinds of places, and you may have a signing using audience with multiple different versions of sign language, and it then becomes a choice as to what you provide. So when we're working with the United Nations, for example, they provide ISL, and then people bring their own interpreters to translate between ISL and backwards and forwards, and you end up with a sort of daisy chain of sign language interpreters. One other thing that I think I've noticed and I've read about recently is the change in how signers are signing because they're on video. So I recently read about the fact that people are actually, because there's less of them available and visible to the audience, and because if you're flat on, you don't have any depth perception, that people are starting to stand at an angle so you can perceive whether or not people are making signs away or to the body, and to give that sense of depth. And they're also doing shallower signs because they're confined to a little window. And I wonder, and I think this is probably a question to you all, whether you think that those changes will stick as a result of this new way of interacting, or if you think that we will find ways to adapt signing presentation to enable people to be the signers to be able to present more like real life.
I mean, I think somebody like Karen Green is doing a lot of work around this kind of stuff. She's one of our interpreters today who owns Interpreting Matter. She's really set to work because I think interpreting has changed massively, probably much more so than captioning. What we do is the same as what we've always done. It's just where it goes is different. For them, the whole nature of their job is completely different. They've been reduced to this tiny square on a screen, and all of the things you're talking about, Neil, have come into play. But also they're now having to deal with massive amounts of technical issues. They're having to deal with cameras to make sure that they're in the right place, that autofocus isn't kicking in on a camera. And this is not something that they've ever had to deal with before. So I think this is an ongoing thing that's people are still trying to catch up with. And I think people like Karen and other people in the industry are doing a lot of work around this to come up with a really good set of rules and things to do to work in this way. So I think it's a watch this space as it unfolds, because I think we all know we're not going back to 100 people in a room all the time for events. The audience is bigger online. It's a more, Mark was saying, a global audience that TechShare Pro never had before. To go back to Google, however much fun it was at Google, and it was fun, it's still not bringing you in that thousands and thousands of audience that you can get online. So, there's talk, I've seen one of the questions in, which is about hybrid events. I think that's where we're going. So yeah, I think this is a watch this space. And I think people with that expertise are working on that right now.
I think I just want to mention something that picks back up on the comment about networking as well. Is I think that what we're planning this year, because we've got longer to run at it, we, like a lot of people, this time last year, we had the space booked, we had the physical space booked, and we kept crossing our fingers thinking it'll all be over by Christmas. And it became increasingly obvious that it wasn't going to happen, but we were mainly concentrating on will it happen rather than what to do. So we gave ourselves probably 3 or 4 months of that switch. And I think lots of people did that. We were already running lots of webinars, so we knew how to do the online bit in small segments. And I think that helped us because we assembled a series of small segments. What we couldn't really do was think about the networking. And I think that's what's going to change this year, is that people will be looking at well, another thing, I wasn't convinced that we needed a lot of pre-recorded content, but we did. It was great. It was much better. It made everything much easier for everybody, including the attendees, because you can see it. It's live, it's there, and it's also recorded straight away, so you can see it and view it on demand. In the networking one, Neil, what I was thinking about with what we saw in our TechShare Pro experience was we were using Teams, and the most successful networking was quite a big group within a Teams meeting. And I think it's because people are used now to how to behave within that sort of space. Whereas previously it was a little bit odd, and it was a bit like you having your conversation in the corridor with somebody else I know and someone else I know, but you're not talking to me, but I can hear you. So I'm like eavesdropping in on this conversation. And it's more accessible because I can watch it and see it, and I don't have to participate in it necessarily. I think that's the hybrid somewhere where you've got more panels, you've got more discussion spaces which are open for interaction, and then you pre-record anything that's essentially broadcast. Just say, look, here's the raw material that we need you to know, but actually we want you to come and talk about that, and we want you to be in a room where you discuss and connect. So then you can create those corridor-like coffee bar moments that's the thing that adds value for the event, really. Now how you make that accessible, we still need to puzzle out, but we realized that we moved most of our content online, and then those are the bits that were left. We hadn't got anything we could do with that bit. We had all the people from the stage on stage, and then we were trying to sort of work out what to put around it. And I think we'll do it the other way around this time. We'll work with that thing in mind and say, how does the forum and the networking and the connecting work? Oh, and here's a load of content that you've probably, you're used to consuming this stuff now. You know what your preference is. You're not going to sit there all day and actually just watch it. So I think that's the switch. And, obviously making that accessible will be a challenge, but at least you can see what the format would be. And a Teams meeting, I think, is a very familiar format for people now. And so you would broadly put that at the heart of your networking activity.
I think that obviously all of these online meeting platforms have evolved over the last year. So you've got far more features than we had at the beginning of this pandemic period. And just going back to what you said about, hoping to run an event live with everything booked, we always do something for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So we had to take a decision really early to switch, because we got locked down in March and GADS in May. And we went with Zoom, and we did a follow the sun webinar, and it was exhausting. It was fun, but it was exhausting, and we're aware that we need to do things differently, but that was quite early. So this year, with a year of online meetings and online events under our belt, we plan to compress the key bits, have breakouts, and I think you're right. People do understand online meeting platforms, but there are also some stuff. So there are platforms like Remo, for example, where they've kind of tried to make it more like a virtualized conference hall where you can go and sit at tables, etc. And I don't know whether people need the visualization of the rooms or the virtual rooms are enough, but I think that the existence of multiple spaces where people can go and talk and network, I think is coming, that will give us a richer virtual experience this year. But then it's working out how we can add those layers of access to those rooms without it being, fully reliant on the slightly still underperforming AI-powered tools, especially when you're in a dynamic environment and it's not just one speaker, because then it does get much more tricky. So, Paula, we've got a question to you, really, and we've started covering it, and that was really about the common barriers that you experience in supporting virtual events with Captions and BSL, particularly when we're streaming all of this stuff. You're on mute, by the way. That's a common barrier. Still on mute.
I had my mouse hovering over it, waiting to click on it. Just didn't do it. Yeah, common barriers, being muted. I've worked with both of you on big events, and Mark, it was lovely to hear how when you moved it there in the background when we were providing the accessibility for TechShare Pro. Again, the biggest barrier is the platforms that people are running events on, or the technical ways that they're running events. There was an awful lot of work to be done around that, particularly on the BSL side, which is always difficult because it's the changing between interpreters. and platforms aren't accessible to support live captioning and BSL, British Sign Language, at the moment. They just aren't. And, the surge of online events and lots of new platforms springing up, and none of them thinking about accessibility. We're running this on StreamYard, and via Access Loop, we're able to add captions and we're able to add BSL. Without Access Loop, you can't do that. When people come to us as a company and say, we're using StreamYard, I say, we can't add captions. We can't do that. What we can do is give you a web page with the captions on, which for me feels like we're going back a step. So, and I've noticed now a lot of production companies have their own bespoke platforms, event platforms for their clients. And they either have no accessibility features, or they're coming up with a technical solution because they're technical providers. So they'll say, yeah, we've got AI captioning. And, that's not a solution for a public-facing event. It's just not consistently accurate enough for somebody like Joanna or Matthew or anybody who needs the captions to really engage and be included. And that's what this is about, to have an equality of inclusion as hearing people or people who are not choosing the captions. That's not what AI is doing at the moment. We've talked about Teams and Google Meets, but really we're locked out of those. So in their minds, they provide AI captioning and that's good enough. Well, the feedback we have is that's just not good enough. And it's just not what people want and need to really be included. And then you've also add on top of that, that's just captioning, add into that, even in Google Meet and Teams, BSL interpreter is really difficult to work in these platforms, constantly having to pin them, then stop, hang on a minute, we've got to pin the other interpreter. We don't want it to be sticking out as accessibility and holding meetings up or perceived as holding meetings up. It should be just easy workflow, easy to do. And I suppose that's where Access Loop has come from, is all of our frustrations has gone into building this platform, all our experience of the difficulties of adding accessibility into events via platforms that are inaccessible. And that's where Access Loop has come from in order to make it easy. The BSL changeovers are all done within Access Loop and they're controlled by the interpreter, not the production person or audio-visual person who has no idea about sign language, who literally clicks a button to change on a prayer, hoping he hasn't cut off something important. So, there was one person all day, Mark, their job was just to change over the sign language interpreters. That's what was going on in the background. Yeah. I've approached all of these platforms. I've asked them, I've approached StreamYard, I've approached Hopin, we've approached all of them and said, can you let us in? And, they basically say that's not our job. Our job is to provide an events platform. The same with, Teams and Microsoft as well. They feel their AI captioning is good enough. Zoom is a platform that stands out. We can provide captioning into that, and they have made some changes, and they actually have a person you can email that is in charge of accessibility. So I will give a shout out to Zoom because I think they are trying, but Zoom isn't an events platform. It's a teleconferencing platform. So the current process at the moment is for me to hack all of these platforms, basically, which is what I spend most of my day doing. And my job's become a lot more technical. And I know that Karen's had the same experience. And no matter what we do, it still is a really difficult experience for all of us. So Access Loop is hopefully going to solve a lot of those problems. And the second thing I'll just say is there's a lack of expertise. I think Melanie mentioned it. The people who are booking with us are not the same people since lockdown started. It's mostly production companies now, or people people who don't know anything about accessibility being asked to provide accessibility, and they have very little understanding or experience about what that involves. So we spend a lot of time explaining to people, and then then it's trying to work around that the technical processes they've already put in place, because the accessibility again is coming at the end of things. Or they say, yeah, we've had loads of technical meetings about this, and I was like, I would have liked to have been a part of those technical meetings because I could have helped and advised you about where we would fit into that workflow. So, but we still always have that technical challenge of bringing the production of an event workflow and then the accessibility workflow together and making them smooth, which is, again, what we've tried to do with Access Loop. So the third thing I would say is the barrier, I think, is budget. You know, I'm always amazed that small charities always have a budget for accessibilities, and yet big companies and corporates don't. You know, people talk about, there's a huge amount of talk about diversity and inclusion. It is the buzz phrase at the moment. You know, we want to be diverse, we want to be inclusive, we want to have a diverse audience, we want to reach as many people as possible, but we've just got no budget to that. And, you know, they come to us and we give them a quote for high quality captioning or British Sign Language, and shock that they have to pay for it almost. You know, what you get in return for providing accessibility is your diverse audience. That's the cost of it. If you want to reach more people, if you want to have a wide audience, there's a cost attached. But you're not getting nothing for it. You're getting what you want, which is diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. You know, captioners and BSL interpreters, they're highly trained professionals. It takes years and years to become a really good interpreter. I am always in awe at the ongoing training that interpreters are committing themselves to, how in-depth, how much they put into their job. Captioners are the same, they're just constantly trying to improve. And then, you know, when you give a cost to that, it's a big shock. And a lot of times it's, oh, well, no, we wanted to be accessible, but we didn't think we'd have to pay for it. So, yes, go ahead.
So I think that, you know, there's quite a lot to unpack there, and partly the reason that the small organisations are, you know, have the budgets is because they're dedicated small organisations, and in a large organisation that's difficult to navigate, there are lots of tiny sub-fractured organisations with their own little budgets, which are a lot smaller than you perceive for these large organisations, and that's not an excuse, because you know, we still need to do it. And I fully support the fact that there is a quality and there is effort behind this, and you need to pay for that because it's a service that ends in a good result and better equality, better inclusion. I do think that the awareness is being raised, but I also think that companies are also beginning to start to budget for this and beginning to centralize budgets. So, for example, I have a centralized budget, so if people need captions, they come to me and I'll pay for them. Right? So it's not, you know, I give them a bit of a hard time and say, look, budget for it yourselves next time, but I'll pay for it this time, and you know, understand you know, that you need to do this. And I hope that more companies will follow that route, where you know, there is at least a centralized fund to help move this forwards and help educate people that accessibility doesn't come for free, but there's a return on that investment. I also think, finally, before we've got one more poll to do, is that I really appreciate the amount of technical effort that goes in to making these platforms accessible that aren't accessible by default, because you guys and the industry as a whole do an amazing job of that. And that's why I'm really excited about Access Loop, because it's meeting an unmet need right now. Because organizations that are well-meaning are going out and they're buying streaming platforms because they need to communicate with their customer base and with their audience. You know, they have to do it. They can't send their salespeople out. There is a real need for them to do this, and none of the platforms are supporting it. So something like Access Loop is meeting a real unmet need. So we've got one more poll for you, and that is open, I think, now, which is, what are the solutions to all of these barriers, and what are your requirements? So sorry, are you asking your speakers and attendees about their access requirements at the virtual events? It's just showing I can't read a script, by the way.
Me either, Neil. I do think the point is it's fantastic to ask, but not everybody's going to, you know, there's hidden audiences out there. I think we've heard that point a few times.
Yes.
My mother-in-law would never ever turn on the captioning in our house, but she most certainly needs it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think the other thing is about asking is that we all got more used to being able to do things at the last minute. You know, in the old days, so to speak, we would register for an event weeks in advance or something, so we'd give you lots of notice. But now people go, oh, I quite like going, oh, is it tomorrow? Yeah. So I think there's more argument, in fact, for anticipating the needs of people coming. So actually just do it, particularly for high-profile events, big events, etc. I think just provide caption, particularly BSL interpreter, make it clear you will provide them, etc. And again, for high-profile events, you really should be mainstreaming accessibility, partly because I think people's attention spans have fractured a bit. And so people going, oh, what was that? I missed that. And you just give that additional reinforcement and additional information. But I'm sure Neil wants to say something. I've done.
Other than, you know, to thank you all for participation. And I believe we've actually got a demo video of Access Loop, which you can now all view.
Introducing Access Loop, making accessibility easy for virtual events. You'll find us at accessloop.com. With Access Loop, it's easy to add accessibility to all live-streamed events. Our platform is browser-based. It's compatible with any streaming encoder and uses a simple workflow. With standardized layouts and simple joining instructions for accessibility providers, we even help you to stream captions in multiple languages. It's never been easier to add accessibility to your live streams. After you've created your Access Loop account, you simply set up a project, adding the name, date, time, and duration. Then enable captions or sign language, or both. Invite the captioner and/or sign language interpreter through an easy-to-use web form. Check your settings and start the loop. Sign language interpreters log into Access Loop through a web browser. When you're in Access Loop, you can see your co-workers and easily hand over to each other with a couple of clicks. Changeovers during the live stream are now really easy and can be managed directly by the communications specialists. With Access Loop, you are fully in control. It's now so easy to create professional-looking streams with standardized settings. Access Loop. Our platform is simple, intuitive, and standardized, and it's designed by accessibility and production experts. accessloop.com. If you want to find out more about making your virtual events more accessible, visit accessloop.com or email us today at hello@accessloop.com to book a demo.
Wow, it's so great to see that demo video. I know Dan has spent many hours on it. So we're back to take questions and answers now. I'm joined by Dan Dexter, who is a co-founder of Access Loop. He is a live stream manager, but he is also technical director for Access Loop too. Catherine's joining us as well, and she runs Attendable, which is a company that advises and runs accessible events and can consult and show you, for all of you out there who want to know how to run an accessible event, the Attendable ladies are your first port of call. So yeah, she's doing fantastic things in the industry and actually help to organize and run the monster that is TechShare Pro.
Thanks, Orla. I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to be here this afternoon with everybody. We've seen the demo, and I can't tell you how much I have been looking forward to Access Loop's arrival. It's a much needed platform, and we're accessibility and inclusion is everything that we do at Attendable, and so having a platform that will easily allow us to add BSL and captions, one or the other or both, to our virtual events will be it should be revolutionary, game-changing day for us, and we're really thrilled to be here. We've had loads of questions come in on Slido, which is amazing. I don't think we're going to have time to answer them all, but we've got there's some technical ones which, Dan, I think we're going to put over to you. And there's a question around hybrid events, which I think we can definitely pick up. So what do we do? Should we take some technical questions now that everybody's seen?
Yes, I need a break.
All I need a bit of a break, yeah. So Dan, an easy one for you to start off with. There's a question, which live stream platforms does Access Loop support?
So Access Loop will support any of the main platforms. So as long as you can stream RTMP into your platform, you can use Access Loop.
Okay, great. And then
that covers everything from YouTube, Hopin, everything really.
StreamYard.
Yeah, anything you'd use a standard streaming protocol.
Great. And then there's some really technical questions. So Patrick Ryan has asked a question: what sort of delay is being introduced from the original stream? And is the system using multiple RMTP streams or feeds? So that's a follow-up one for you, Dan.
Yep, great. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for your question. So we are using RTMP stream feeds. So we're taking an RTMP stream in, which would come from your encoder, and then they would go onto Access Loop where it'd be overlaid and then RTMP out. And I believe the end-to-end time is less than 500 milliseconds. So it's very quick. So you don't add much delay at all from your start to your endpoint.
Okay, great. And so Tom Dearden also had a question about
hi, Tom.
Multiple endpoints. So when rebroadcasting, do you support multiple endpoints? Also, is the stream pushed or pulled from the RMTP broadcast?
Yeah. So
question, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I will answer it, and most people probably won't understand the answer, but those that do will understand it.
That's why you're here, Dan.
Yeah, so we take an RTMP pull. So as your encoder, we would pull the RTMP stream from your encoder into Access Loop. And in terms of the multiple destinations, so Access Loop is a subscription-based model. And each of the subscriptions have multiple output destinations. So with the lower packages, you can stream to 4 separate destinations at the same time. So this is quite useful if you want to run a backup stream. So say you've got one stream with captions and BSL going to a virtual events platform, but then you've got another running to, say, Vimeo as a backup stream. That's all doable within the platform. You don't need to run it through anything else. And then with the top band tier of subscription, you can stream to 10 endpoints. And that is partly because we have introduced multi-language captions. So you can have 10 different languages, all streaming to different endpoints and different players. It's very clever.
It certainly is. Yeah. So when it all works, which is always blows my mind. Ola, are you ready to take a question, or would you like
go on then?
Okay,
no, it's fine. Let's give Dan a break.
You and I can answer, but quite a few people have commented on budget for access.
I think I poked the bear there, didn't I?
You poked the bear, and I know you've got lots of strong thoughts on it, and so have I. So if you want to start off, and then I'll chip in. So what do you manage budget constraints basically with accessibility?
I think don't leave your accessibility to the end, because you will have spent your budget. I think that's what I find is people go, oh, we've just thought we're doing something around this, we should have captions. You know, I always know we're in for a difficult conversation then. I think if you're running an event, decide to have a budget for accessibility, and don't just pick a figure out of the air. Contact us, contact other people, find out what it is we offer. Each company offers different things. You need to find what suits your event and find out the costs, and then go back and see if you can raise those costs. One thing people do, particularly if you don't have it depends on your event, is they ask a sponsor to sponsor the captions. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a good idea. If you're a membership organization with it's good to ask one of your members to sponsor the captions or sponsor the BSL interpreting, and it's another way of raising your profile in that way. So I think just think of your budget early.
Those are some really great tips, Ola, and I agree with you. And also, I think if budget is a constraint, full stop, then think about the length and the complexity of your event. So we heard a lot about TechShare Pro, which Mark from MobilityNet mentioned, and Attendable, the organisers for that. The accessibility bill for a 3-day complex event was really quite high. But that's a large, ambitious, multi-stream event going out over 3 days, hours and hours and hours of content. If you are committed to making your events more accessible and inclusive, and you don't have a big budget, then think about making it a 1-hour event. If you bring it in under an hour, you're going to reduce the cost of the captions or the sign language interpretation. Or if you can only do one thing, then provide the captions, because they have benefit for many people, not just people with impairments.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then you can always say if people would like British Sign Language, they should request it, or they could request it. I think that's quite a good idea.
Yeah, if you started from the beginning and you're planning the event, and you set out and say, this event will be in English, we will provide captions, please advise us by a certain time to give you enough time to resource it. Also, British Sign Language interpreters or other sign language interpreters in other countries are a rare, scarce resource, and they book up quickly. So the earlier you plan it, the better price you're likely to get, and so on, and then you can meet everybody's needs.
I mean, we also sometimes charge a technical fee because it's so difficult to work through these technical issues. But obviously, if people are using Access Loop, we won't have to do that. We also, particularly if it is a technical job, we'll have to charge another hour because we'll have to be there. Again, with Access Loop, you don't need to do that. So I do think it's going to cut costs a bit.
Great. So the next question I'm keen for us to address is the hybrid question. So Liam Bremmer's asked, are we thinking about how Access Loop can work, or how accessibility can work once events become hybrid? So we're all looking forward to the day when we can get together in a room that's not on a flat screen. And in fact, Ola and Dan, we've all had experience of doing that. Ola, I remember us sitting there working out the captions and the BSL and on the stage, and then on the live stream from the event that we did a couple of years ago together. Access Loop's the perfect tool for this, right?
Yeah,
it is, Dan. We've definitely thought about it. We had many discussions around this, and yes, you can use Access Loop as a hybrid tool. So, Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so one of the things we have really thought about it, because at some stage people will be to have in-room events again, but obviously there will probably be a restriction on numbers. So it does need to be an option where you can have the full accessibility within the room and on the live stream. And one of the things that has worked really well is because it has such low latency, it would be possible to bring the signers and the captions into the room and use that as a relay screen. It because there is a delay, it might not be completely perfect to put on the main screen, but it is something that we have thought about. And there's as we develop this further, there'll probably be other options for being able to bring in those elements separately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we do, what you're providing for your audience should be the same wherever they are. So fundamentally, you want people in the room to be able to access it, and also if you're joining people via a live stream for all or part of the event, And it's just making sure you've also, when you're perhaps choosing your venue, and you're looking at the AV suite and so on, is asking the on-site facilities or production team, what their capabilities are, and go with them and say you want to use this, that's what you want to do, and are they familiar with Access Loop? Because I think it's the easiest way. I mean, we've had all kinds of hacks and weird and wonderful solutions that we've come around to make it work, and it's it's not been a sort of optimal experience. And what I love about Access Loop is that ease of communication from behind the scenes. So from an event organizer's perspective, I've got control. I know that the captioners and the sign language are okay, because I can't follow sign language, so I don't know when they're wanting to hand over from each other. They're the experts, they're the professionals, they need to know. And now it's an easy interchange, and I can delete some of the 20,000 WhatsApp groups I've got for all the different events that I've run from my phone. So that's great. I think so we've got a few minutes left, and we've had so many questions in. It's going to be really hard for us to.
Can I pick up on I've seen a few questions coming in about the layout, so it'd be really good, I think, to pick up on that. So there's quite a few options within Access Loop in terms of how you have the layout. So I think someone was asking about the black box at the top. So for this event, we've decided to scale the incoming video. So the video coming from StreamYard is scaled down so that it's not being cropped by the captions or the sign language. And particularly when you're using the sign language, because that takes up quite a large part of the corner, it is better to scale it in so you're not losing some of your the video that you can be displaying some of the content on. But there are a number of different ways of presenting this. So we can do the full frame video, and what I would suggest is just drop us an email and we'll arrange a demo, and you can see all the different forms of what's going to work best for your events.
Yeah, it's great to have that flexibility and to be able to choose the layout, and often that's something that we're not all technical experts, and so being able to, and particularly thinking back to the budget question, if you haven't got someone like Dan who's at your or some of the many event producers that we've got watching the stream today, if you haven't got that budget and resource for someone to do it for you, then it needs to be simple and straightforward, and being able to position where your captions appear and your speakers, and so the focus is on the content. I liked what Joanna was saying about she needs to see as much of the content as possible, as well as having the captions. That's really important feedback from an end user. And we should be thinking about that as we're developing our events. So there was one. Have I got time for one final question? Do you think?
Go for it.
We've got 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, we've got some more videos to show, and so we don't want to miss out on those. So just a question about sort of tips for producing more accessible and inclusive events. And I think we have covered off some of it, but really for me, it's about planning. So planning to be inclusive from the start. So when you set out, you think, oh great, we're going to have an event. When you're thinking about the purpose and the audience, think about inclusion. Ask the audience, what their access requirements are, or indeed their language requirements are. Access Loop, we know, can support multiple language streams. And then I think it's practice. Because if you run a practice with your speakers, you'll soon get to know what access requirements they have, and then you can anticipate. During a live stream, lots of things are happening, and you can only make certain. Once you're live, you're live. And you can only make certain tweaks and adjustments, and it's not the same as being in the room. So having a practice run, allowing, we did that for today's session. We practiced with the contributors, and make sure that Joanna's headphones connected in the right way, all that kind of stuff. It's really important. You want people to be able to give their best. So practice, and then I think this is often a step that gets lost, and it's once the event's done, and events professionals, this is a classic for us. It's done, so we're on to the next one, and we don't want to kind of pause and take stock. And so doing a bit of a review, going through the delegate feedback and the questions, and addressing some of the things that didn't go so well. It's really good practice, particularly around accessibility. What could we, and ask yourselves, what could we have done better? Because when the next event rolls around, you'll be better placed to to put all that stuff in place.
And I would also say, share all the information with your communication professionals. Make sure they get the support that they need to support your event, because, captioners you watch it and it's like magic, but, scripts, names of people, speakers have notes. We have people and they say, oh yeah, we've got nothing. And then you see somebody reading at top speed from a script with technical language and words and naming people. And it's just a mountain to climb to make it accessible. And then all of the responsibility lies with the BSL interpreter or the captioner to then try and make some sense of what's being said. So make it easy for the people that you're working with by providing them with the materials that they need to do their job well and timely. Captioners and BSL interpreters are busy. So prep work takes time. So please think of that.
As someone that sits between the speakers and the interpreters, I know I'm always chasing speakers for their slides in advance, and being chased by the captioners and sign language interpreters for the slides in advance. So I want to please both people and make sure it's a great event. But yeah, that's a really great point, Orla, is that advanced preparation and for things like difficult names, specialist terminology.
Yes,
like that.
A glossary of terms is great. I think as well, putting a deadline in. I appreciate that people want to keep tweaking their slides, but I was speaking at an event recently at the University of Arts, and she gave me a deadline of a week before to hand in my presentation, and it was a bit of like, what? But actually, it was really useful for me, and it was really useful for everybody, because she wanted to send everything round so people who are visually impaired could run it through screen readers and have that preparation, and anyone who needs to see it early could see it early. And I finished, so I had a nice weekend where I wasn't worried about my presentation. And I thought that was she just said, because of the accessibility around this event, we need it by this date. So I think you just have to be firm with speakers, because you would just tweak and tweak and tweak.
Yeah, there has to be an end point at some point.
There really does.
I feel we've reached that now, Orla.
Yes, I'm slowly going off the screen.
I mean, we could talk about this all day, and the three of us and the other colleagues that we work with.
I think we do, don't we?
So it's been great, and sorry we couldn't get through everybody's questions, but we will follow up. We can do some FAQs and follow up on email, so make sure you're signed up on accessloop.com, and so that you get mailings, and Access Loop are hoping to do regular live streams going forward to continue this conversation. We think it's really important, and we'd love you all to continue to carry on the conversation with us.
Brilliant.
Over to you.
I think we're going to have another video now, which is the Elaine McCarthy, who is the third co-founder of Access Loop, and my business partner, who I've worked with longer than I've actually been married, and I have been married a very long time. So over to the wonderful Elaine.
Hi there, my name's Elaine McCarthy, and to answer the question, what's your experience of accessibility in virtual events, is that there's been many problems that we've had to overcome over the last few years, and just to name a few of those is as a captioner, you're always trying and worried about your sound, your audio, your visuals, will they sync up together, the correct font, color, size, your background. And then if you're co-working on an event, what's a real worry as a captioner, which is the handover. So, you know, to communicate with your other co-worker, you usually have to set up a WhatsApp, a Skype message to indicate when you're stopping and when the other person is starting. So all these stops the flow of to be fully accessible and for captions to look really well. But with Access Loop, we have covered all these problems, and it's all in one platform. So it should be really easy to use and a dream for a captioner.
Thank you, the lovely Elaine. I have to say, when we've been testing on Access Loop, it really is a dream for a captioner. I click a button, I'm in, and within 5 minutes, my captions are going out in the live stream. So it really is fantastic. Just thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I really hope the discussions, the panels, the interviews will encourage all of you to have more confidence around making events accessible, whatever role that you're playing, and has helped open your mind to all the different possibilities. Thank you to everyone who's been involved in the development of Access Loop and who supported and encouraged us on this journey. And those of you who are poised to sign up for an account, and we have people who've already booked events with the platform in use. So I'm really delighted to see that it's been a really positive response so far. The website goes live tomorrow morning, so you can sign up. And yeah, thanks so much for coming. See you next time.